Okay, welcome everyone. As we get underway here on a beautiful Tuesday evening, and we are sponsored in our tour through Shavuos by A.B. Spry. And A.B. Spry is sponsoring it for the Refuah Shalema of Taiba Reiza Bas Hinda, and also for great zivugim for their daughter and their grandchildren. We are also sponsored by Shelley Zeitlin, and Shelley Zeitlin is sponsoring for his children, Ellie and Orit and Ora, and also for my Refuah Shalema, Moshe Meir ben Esther Fradel. And also, we're going to have in mind, one second, for Shimon ben Sarah Miriam, he should have a Refuah Shalema b'seich she'achel Yisrael. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe we're also being sponsored anonymously. I'm not exactly sure. I got a virtual sponsorship, but I wasn't confirmed. But either way, person at least said he wants to sponsor. We're holding on the very, very top line of Daf Hey Amid Aleph, and we had a bit of confusion whether Rebbe says Ribuye and Miyute, or whether Rebbe says the less expansive Klale Prote Klale. We said Ribi Miyat Riba is more expansive than Klal Prata Klal. And we had thought that Rebbe holds of the more expansive Ribuya Miyat. The problem is that then we saw by the Martseya, the all, that we pierce a Eved who wants to stay beyond the 6 years and he wants to stay until Yovel. So while the Tanakama said you're allowed to use a splinter and you're allowed to use a thorn, Rebbe said it has to be metal like the awl, and that's because Rebbe said Klal Prata Klal. So you see that Rebbe holds that we say Klal Prata Klal. So the Gemara says, you're right. In Ba'alma Klal Prate Darish. But what about by Pidyon Aben? If you remember, by Pidyon Aben, Rebbe was more expansive and said by Pidyon Aben that you could redeem the child even with servants and karkais, even with servants and real estate. He only excluded shtarais, notes. So he said, Gemara says, but v'hach hainu taima kedetani debei Rabbi Yishmael. The reason why he's more expansive by Pidyon Aben is the Tana debei Rabbi Yishmael by the insistence that a fish is only kosher if it has snapir v'kaskesas, fins and scales. So it says, b'mayim shnei pa'amim. In the pasuk, you have two klolim next to each other. It says, b'mayim, in the water, instead of putting the klal in between the prat, in between the two klalim, it has them two klalim next to each other. B'mayim shnei pa'amim. And since the two klalim are nearby each other, ein zeh klal prat, that doesn't have the status of a klal prat, ela riba omiyat. And therefore, in such a case, and he says the same thing by Pidyon Aben, where you don't have the prat in between the two klalos, we say riba miyat riba, and not klal prata klal. Ein zeh klal prat, ela riba miyat. Rabbanan hold that if you have two klolim next to each other, you just put the prat that's mentioned later in between them and sandwich it in between them. Amar Avina, K'de'imrei b'marava, like they said in the west. West means, since Eretz Yisrael was to the west of Bavel, when the Babylonian Talmud says in the west, it means in Eretz Yisrael. when you have two principles next to each other, hotel prat beineim, just put the specification said later on between them, v'dunan b'chlal prat. So the Gemara says, okay, so then hashta da amrit Rebbe klolei prate darish. So then we have a problem, because that means that he doesn't hold of the riba, miyat riba, by Shavuos that would include even a Shavuos she'avar, even a past Shavuos. Says the Gemara, Bal Karcha Kasha Shavuos, it's our case of Shavuos. Ela b'Shavuos nasiv aliba de Rabbi Akiva. By Shavuos he holds like Rabbi Akiva that says that you're chayiv even a Shavuos for she'avar, v'leiloi svira leivi, and he himself doesn't hold that. Now we darshan that it says in the pasuk v'nelam v'nelam 2 times gufa. Gufa means let us analyze what we learned a little bit more carefully. Minayin she'enoi chayiv elal sheyesh ba yediyah b'tchila v'yediyah b'seif. How do we know that there's only a carbon oila v'yared, a sliding scale carbon, where Shalom knew he was tamei, and then forgot and ate kachim and went into the mikdash, and then realized it afterwards. Elal sheyesh ba yediyah b'tchila v'yediyah b'seif v'helam bein time, and an unawareness in the middle. Talmud Leimer, it says v'nelam shnei pamin. So v'nelam means he was nelam in the beginning, right? Excuse me, v'nelam shnei pamin, to tell me that there has to be an awareness in the beginning, awareness in the end, and unaware in the middle. Divrei Rabbi Kiva. That's the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi says, I don't need both v'nelams for that purpose. Ein etzarech. Hari Oimer v'nelam, when it says that Shalom was unaware, that implies that beforehand he knew. Michlal sheyada. And then it says, V'hu yada, he realized afterwards his mistake. Hari kan shtei yediyas. So what do we do with the second nelam? Im kemat talmud loyma v'nelam. The second nelam is coming to tell me that you're chayiv not only if you were unaware that you were tamei, but also Shalom would be chayiv if he knew that he was tamei, but he was unaware that it was the mikdash, or unaware that it was kachim. Chayiv al helam tama, or val helam or val helam mikdash, where he knew that he was tamei, but he was unaware that it was the mikdash, or that he was unaware that it was kachim. Now, the Gemara made a statement, an interesting statement, that when it says v'nelam and he was unaware, that means that he knew about it and then he became unaware. V'nelam and he was unaware implies that he knew about it before and now he became unaware. Says the Gemara, how do we know that? Aman ma'ar v'nelam, he was unaware, mechlal sheyada. So the Gemara says, no, maybe my mashma, maybe Nela means he was unaware entirely. He never knew that he became tamei. How do we know that Nela means that he was once aware and then he forgot? Says the Gemara, you know how we know? Since it doesn't say, and he was unaware, but rather he says, v'nelam, and he became unaware, Mechlal, that beforehand he knew. So the Gemara now tries to plug this in other places where it says v'nelam, and it has a problem. Amalei Abaya elamiyata kabesaita, the doubtful adulterous woman. What happened? Chatzkel saw his wife, Delilah, flirting with somebody. Chatzkel saw Delilah flirting with Shmuel, and he warned her not to be alone with Shmuel. If then she's alone in room 208 of the Holiday Inn, she becomes a Saita. Now, and it became unknown in the eyes of the husband. Does that mean it became unknown, but before he knew about it? Before he knew that his wife was intimate with Shmuel? That can't be. Because if she was intimate with Shmuel and he continued living with her as a husband, then the waters would not test her. Would the waters test her? If he lived with her after she was intimate with Shmuel, then the waters wouldn't test her, because the waters only test her if the husband is innocent. But a husband, once she's intimate with another man, is not allowed to sleep with her. So if he knew before, if the husband is clean from sin, then the woman will bear her sin, and the waters will test. The waters will test his wife. So it can't be that he knew before that she was intimate with Shmuel. V'su, Gabei Torah, in singing the praises of the Torah and how it is beyond the ken of any man or even malach. The Torah is hidden. It's beyond comprehension from any living person. And even for those that fly in the heavens, the malachim, it's hidden. Now, since it says Elma, does that mean that beforehand they did know? Now it's hidden? But before now they did know? That beforehand there were people that knew the Torah, the entirety of the Torah? Can't be. No man knows its value. Elamar Abaya says, when it says Vinelma, it means that until now there was partial awareness. What does partial awareness mean? That he learned about Tumah in yeshiva. Kasava Rebbe Yediyah space Rabba Shma Yediyah. Shalom could be chayiv a carbon oil of a yored, even if he didn't know that he touched the sheretz, but he learned about in yeshiva that you're not allowed to touch kachim if you touch the sheretz. And that's partial yediyah. And the same thing works by the saita. In other words, this man had partial yediyah that she's a flirt, because she was flirting with Shmuel. And yes, beforehand, people had partial awareness of the Torah, but not full awareness. Says the Gemara, Amali Rapapala Abaya, Eladiktani Aimba Yediyah Betchila. The case that it says in the Mishnah, where you have only V'yesh Yediyah B'Seif, where you only have awareness at the end, but you don't have awareness in the beginning. Who could you say, what Jew could you say that he doesn't have partial awareness? The Jew went to yeshiva, says the Gemara, the Lesla Yediyah space rabbi. Is there a Yiddish boy that didn't have an education of the rudimentary laws of Chumash? Says the Gemara, yes there is. Yes there is. A child that was abducted and grew up amongst the Goyim. A child that was abducted and grew up amongst the Goyim, or was from the Cantonistan, and was drafted as a very little child, he doesn't have a Yediyah B'Tchila, because he didn't learn about the Tumah in the beginning. Okay, just getting underway on a beautiful Tuesday evening. The Olam is getting around and showing up finally, as we welcome in Ruvain Pollack, who is here very much on time, as Ruvain usually is, Saba, and we welcome in Irving Fishbaum and Michal. We welcome in Eddie Chazan, who's in a helicopter, and Dov Solkowitz, and Yitzi Fuchs, Mo Kushner, Mel Zachter, Shalom Fogel, back in Lakewood, and Menachem Yamansky, Reb Kaniel, Yaakov Warman, Shimon Klein, Dr. Black, Barry Cement, and Aaron Swade, Rabbi Kranz, Shelley Zeitlin, Nachman Chaplin, Moshe Lehman, Berish Gesserman, Elia Shutman, Danny Vogel, Yitzi Muller, Abe Arbach, Avram Zepkowitz. Abe, we need more batteries. And here in Shul, we have the pleasure of having Chaim Kramer, Michal Avram Chavin, Ruvain Shannet. So we are holding now 2 lines into Daf Hamad Aleph. Now, you know what, before we learn this, it would be helpful to get a little bit of a refresher course on Shabbos. Remember, in Shabbos, always we consider the Balabayas is the one that's in the house, and the Ani is the one that's outside in the Rosh Hashanah. Now, Haitzah is usually carrying outside. Now, in order to be chayiv a capital offense for Haitzah, you have to have an Akira and a Hanacha. So if the Balabayas picks something up inside and makes a Hanacha outside, that's Haitzah. Or the second case of Haitzah is if the Ani sticks his hand inside, picks up something, that's the Akira, and brings it out and puts it down in the Rosh Hashanah, that's the Hanacha. Those are the 2 cases of Haitzah. Then there's 2 cases of Achnasa. That's bringing in from the Rosh Hashanah to the Rosh Hashanah, right? So what would be if the Ani picks it up outside and puts his hand in and puts down inside, that's Haknasa. Or if the Balabayas takes his hand out, picks up something from the Rosh Hashanah and brings it into his house, that's another case of Haknasa. Now, these are all now, Haitzah is the Av. Why is that the principle? Because that was the case of Haitzah highlighted in the Beis Hamikdash, by the Mishkan, when they brought things from their private areas into the Machna Leviah to Moshe, which was Rosh Hashanah. So Haitzah is a Av, Hachnasa is a Tolda, is a derivative. Now, then there is a action that's potter. The action that's potter is where you only do an Akira and not a Hanacha, or you only do Hanacha and not an Akira. So, for example, if the Balabayas takes something, puts his hand outside, and then the Ani takes it out of his hand, so the Balabayas did the Akira, and the Ani did the Hanacha, that's potter. It's not mutter, because we don't want to do a half, because you might come to do the whole thing, but it's potter avalasa, but it's potter, it's not a biblical sin. There would be no skila, and there would be no carbon chatas if done unwittingly. Okay, with that preface, that's at least the preface. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. And now let's see the Gemara inside. Tanan Osam, we learned over there in Masechta Shabbos Yitzia Shtayim Shein Arba Bifnim, that the Yitzias are 2 which are 4 for the Balabayas in the inside of the house, or Shtayim Shein Arba B'chutz, and 2 which are 4 for the Ani outside of the house. Now our Mishnah just says Yitzias Shabbos Shtayim Shein Arba, 2 which are 4. Why in Masechta Shabbos does it say 2 which are 4 for the inside and 2 which are 4 for the outside? Simple question. Ma'ishna Acha Detanya Shnayim Shein Dalet, 2 which are 4, the Sulai and nothing else. Or Ma'ishna Asem, or why over there Masechta Shabbos the Tani Shtayim Shein Arba B'fnim, 2 which are 4 for the person on the inside, or Shtayim Shein Arba B'chutz, and 2 which are 4 for the person on the outside. So the Gemara says, Masechta Shabbos, that's the, main place to talk about Shabbos. Hasam the Iker Shabbos Tani Avos V'Toldos. It says the principles and the derivatives. Hacha the Lav Iker Shabbos here, which it's not the Iker Shabbos, Avos Tani. It says the principles V'Toldos Loy Tani. It doesn't say the derivatives. Now that doesn't work. because the principles are only two. Remember, I told you the principle is haitzah, carrying from outside to from inside the house to outside haitzah. That's only two. So the Gemara says, Ovis Ma'niu, what are the principles? Yitzias, carrying it out. Yitzias tarte. The Yitzias are only two. The Balabayas taking it out and putting it in the Rishus Harabim, or the Ani sticking his hand in, taking it out and bringing it into the Rishus Harabim. The Chi Tema Mehem Lechiv Mehem Leptur. When it says over here, Shtayim Shein Arba, it means Yitzias. Some of them are a chiv and some of them are ptur. In other words, where do we say when you carry it outside, you're chayiv? That's where you do both an akira and a hanacha. But there's also cases where it's potter, and that, for example, if the balabayas puts his hand outside, and then the ani takes it from him, so the balabayas only did a yitziyah, and the ani did the hanacha, so that would be a case of a yitziyah that's potter. But that can't be, because our Mishnah can't be talking about a case of ptur, because it also says there are 4 shades of leprosy, and all 4 shades of leprosy are leprosy. It says similar to shades of leprosy. All 4 shades, right? The seis and its tolda and the baharis and the tolda, they're all chayiv, afhacha kulu l'chiyuva. Rather, says the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom of Daf Hey Amud Aleph, Elama Rav Papa explains, Hasam de'ikar Shabbos tani chiyuvei u'peturei. Over there, which is the main discussion of Shabbos, it says those cases where both the ani and the balabayas did a full action, both in akira and hanacha, which is a chiyuv, and it talks about the cases where it was a split job, where the ani did the akira and the balabayas did the hanacha, or vice versa. So Hasam over there, the ikar Shabbos tani chiyuvei p'turei. Hacha here, which it's not the ikar Shabbos, chiyuvei tani. It says the chiyuvei, the 2 cases of Eitzah, and the 2 cases of Achnasa, where there's both an Akira and Hanacha done by the same person, or Peturei Loitani. So the Gemara says, chiyuvei ma'ninu. What are the case of chiyuv? If you're talking about Yitzia, which means taking it out from the house into the Rishus Harabim, Yitzias Tarte Udahavyan. That's only 2. Says the Gemara, no, it means the 2 cases of Yitzia and the 2 cases of Achnasa. The 2 cases where you take it out and the 2 cases where it's brought in. Shtayim Doitzah, Shtayim Achnasa. The problem is, if 2 of the cases are bringing it in, why are they called Yitzias? Yitzias means taking out. Well, Yitzias Ketani. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Ashi, Tana Achnasa Nami Haitzah Karila. The Tana calls bringing it in, the ani bringing it into the house, or the Balabai sticking his hand outside and bringing it into the house, is also called the Yitziyah. Says the Gemara, Memai, how do we know that? We know that clearly, because in Masechta Shabbos it says, the Tanan, first of all, we know it because it says, if one takes from one domain to other domain, he's chayiv. Now that's not only if you take from the Rishus Yachid to the Rishus Harabim, but it's also where you take from the Rishus Harabim to Rishus Yachid. So you see that Haknasa is also considered Hamaitzi. So the Gemara says, Milay Askinon de Kama'ayel Yulei, isn't it also covering where you bring it from the Rishus Harabim into the Rishus Yachid, which is an Achnasa? V'kakari lehaltza, says the Gemara, but who says? V'dilma mapik Rishus Yachid Rishus Harabim. Maybe when it says Amoitzi Rishus, it's only talking from taking it from the Rishus Yachid to the Rishus Harabim. Says the Gemara, then it shouldn't have said it in the generic way. Hamaitzi Meshus Rishus. It should have just said Hamaitzi Meshus Yachad Rishus Rabin. Im Kain Nisna Hamaitzi Meshus Yachad Rishus Rabin. My Rishus Rishus. It means from either domain, either inside or outside. Dafilu Rishus Rabin Rishus Yachad, and it's called Haitzah. It's called Hamaitzi. V'Kakari Le Haitzah. But now, Shalom wants to know, why is Hachnatza called Haitzah? He's an entomologist. He wants to know. I've been bringing it in. Why is that called Haitzah, taking it out? V'amai korila b'time amai, because we look at the taking an item out of its place is called Haitzah. Taking an item from where it's rested is called taking it from its place. Tana kol akiras chayfetz mimakaymai, taking an item from its place, Haitzah karila, is considered taking it out. Now Ravina has a different spin. Ravina says, Amar Ravina Masnisa, first the Gemara says, and we know that that's the case, that Hachnasa is included in Haitzah, because Amar Ravina Masnisa Namidek, if you look in Masechta Shabbos, it's clear that embedded in the word of Haitzah is also Hachnasa. The Ketani, it says in Masechta Shabbos, Yitzia Shtayim Shein Arba B'fnim, there's two which are four for the Balabayas on the inside, or Shtayim Shein Arba B'chutz, and two which are four for the Ani on the outside. Now the Ani on the outside, when he brings it in, that's definitely Achnasa. So you see that bringing it in is also called Yitzia, Shmamina. Rava says a little different shot. Rava says, when it says Yitzias HaShabbos, it means how many domains are there for Shabbos. Rava Amar Rishuyas Ketani. How many biblical domains are there? There's two biblical domains. Rishus HaYachad and Rishus HaRabin. Rishuyas Shabbos Shtayim. There are another two domains. One is the rabbinical domain called Carmelis, and one is called the Makom P'tur. There are Daled Rishuyas for Shabbos. But here, when it says Yitzias HaShabbos, it means there's two biblical domains, and that's the Rishus HaYachad and the Rishus HaRabin. Now, in the beginning of this Masechta, you really get a tour of a variety of subjects. So now let's go to the four shades of leprosy. And again, let me give you a brief preface. Prefaces are a little helpful, or very helpful. So there are two leprosies of Baheres and Se'es. The Baheres is the Av, and Se'es is an Av, and each one has a tolda. Each one has a derivative attached, and the way it works is that the Baheres is when it's white as snow. Its tolda is when it's white like sid, like lime. Se'es is where it's white like wool, and its tolda is like the white of an egg, kekrumbeya, like the white of an egg. So again, let me remind you how that works, because this could get a little confusing, and we're going to have a test afterwards, Barry. Baheres is white as snow. Its second is white like sid. Se'es is white like wool, and its second is like the white of an egg. So let's see that first. It's not awesome. Maris Negayim, appearances of leprosy. are shnayim shein arba, are two which are four. Baheres is aza kishelik, is strong like snow, white like snow. Shniela, its tolda, is kesida heichel, is like the line, the plaster of the temple. Seis is ketzemer lovin, is like the white of wool. Shniela, its derivative, its tolda, is kekrumbeya, is like the white of an egg. Now Rabbi Akiva holds of a list. Rabbi Akiva has a list. Rabbi Akiva holds that there's brighter and brightest. So Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that the list in order of brightness is snow, wool, lime, and the least bright is the white of the egg. Again, snow, wool, lime, and the white of an egg. Now, why is that important to know? Why is Yaakov Warman says, I like antique white. Most of the ladies, when they want to paint, they want to use antique white. Right? So, what's the difference? Snow, wool, lime, the white of an egg. Rabbi Akiva holds, in order for it to be tzaras, it has to be the size of a gris, the size of a split bean. Rabbi Akiva holds two different shades of white can combine if they're next to the shade, either after it or before it. So that according to Rabbi Akiva, you would be able to combine the snow with the wool. It's next to it, right? Or maybe not. Let's see how this develops. Says the Gemara, Amar Reb Chanina, Man Tana Maris Negayim, who is the author of Appearances of Leprosy, the like Rabbi Akiva. The Rabbi Akiva came in the Amar Zulamala Mizu. Zulamala Mizu, since he says that you could combine something that's next to the one next to it. Im Kain, if that's the case, tiharta sidha heichel militzaref. You would make lime not able to be mixed. Why? Bahade man litzerfe. With whom should it mix? Litzerfe bahade baheres, right? Because we said the order is snow, wool, lime, and the white of an egg. So for it to combine with snow, it can't, because snow is not next to it. It's snow, wool, lime, and the white of an egg. Because there's the wool that gets in between the snow and the lime. So you'll say, Litzerfei Bahade Seis, let it combine with the wool, because that's next to it, right? Snow, wool, lime, and the white of an egg. So let it combine with wool. Lav tolda dideyu. It's not its tolda. You could only combine with your own of. And according to what we said, the lime is a tolda of baheres. It's not a tolda of seis. It's not a tolda of wool. So what will the lime combine with? It can combine with the one next to it, which is wool, because lime is a tolda of Baharis, according to our Mishnah. And the tolda of Baharis, it can combine with seis, because it's not its derivative, it's a different type. It can combine with the Baharis, with the snow, because it's not next to it. Says, well, if then you should have the same kasha with the white of the egg. The white of an egg, who would it combine with? Litzerfei b'hadei seis, its av is wool. It can't combine with wool because the lime is in between it. The lime interrupts between the white of the egg and the wool. Litzerfei b'hadei sid should combine with wool. It can't combine with wool. It can't combine with lime, because lime is a tolda of a lime is a tolda of Baharis, while the white of the egg is a tolda of seis. So la barmino, says the Gemara. That wouldn't be a question. Hi mai. Bishleim b'loy sid heichel. Krum be'aloi kasha. The white of an egg is not a problem. As we said, the white of an egg is a derivative of se'es. Even if it's not next to it, even Rabbi Kiva would be minded that it would combine with the wool. Why? The afal got the krum be'ah mitatoi the se'es, even though the krum be'ah is separated from the wool by the line, Rachmana Amar l'seis u'l'sapachas. Seis and its second. Sapachas tfeila l'seis. The tapachas is that which is second to the seis, meaning the white of the egg. So the afal gav the mitzcha minei tuva. So there, since the pasuk says clearly seis and sapachas, seis and its second, even Rabbi Kiva would be moida that even though it's separated and it's not next to the wool, because the lime is in between and intercepting, it has to be able to combine because it says seis and sapagas. Ela sid eichel kasha. So therefore, the Gemara says, Ela machvarta masnisan the like Rabbi Akiva. It's better to explain that our Mishnah is not going according to Rabbi Akiva. Now tomorrow, we're going to show how we know that Rabbi Akiva holds that the order is snow, wool, lime, the white of an egg, and it only combines with the one that's next to it. But that's, I know I leave you these days with a cliffhanger.